When a quiet black inmate tries to eat in peace, a white supremacist and his gang surround him, laughing, taunting, daring him to fight back. But the man they're mocking isn't just anyone. He's a former MMA fighter with the power to break bones in seconds, and the discipline not to. As violence erupts nearby, he moves, not to attack, but to protect. In seconds, he calms the chaos without throwing a single punch. That moment should earn him respect. Instead, it puts a target on his back. Now the gang wants blood. The guards see danger, and just when his freedom is finally within reach, everything is set up to make him snap. But what he does next, it doesn't just change his story, it forces everyone, even his enemies, to question what real strength looks like. The chow hall buzzed with the usual midday noise, plastic trays clattering, voices echoing off concrete walls, the shuffle of feet on worn floors. Malik Rivers kept his eyes on his tray, methodically working through the bland prison food. His broad shoulders were relaxed, his breathing steady. He'd learned long ago that peace came from within, not from what others did or said. The scrape of chair legs made him aware of movement, but he didn't look up. Heavy footsteps approached, followed by snickers and whispers. Cole Harkness's shadow fell across Malik's tray. "Well, look who's sitting all alone," Cole drawled, his voice carrying. "What's wrong? None of your homies want to eat with you today?" Malik took another bite, chewing slowly. His hands remained open on the table, palms flat against the metal surface. The voices around them dropped to a watchful hush. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Cole leaned closer, his tattooed arms braced on the table. "What, you too good to answer? Think you're better than everybody else?" Officer Sandoval shifted his position by the wall, moving closer without being obvious about it. His dark eyes tracked the growing tension, ready but not interfering yet. Malik kept his breathing even, just like in training. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The food had lost its taste, but he kept eating. Each bite was deliberate, controlled. "Look at him, acting all dignified," Cole sneered to his audience. They laughed on cue, spreading out to block any clear view from the guards. Trying to act like he belongs here with decent folk. Malik felt the hate radiating off Cole like heat from a furnace, but he didn't feed it. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Baby, some folks are so full of poison, they want to make you drink it too. Don't you swallow their poison." Cole's crew pressed closer, their anticipation building. They wanted a show. They wanted violence. Malik focused on his breathing, on staying present without getting pulled into their game. "Maybe he's just stupid," Cole announced, bumping Malik's shoulder hard enough to slosh water from his cup across the table. "That must be it, right, boys? Too stupid to understand when he's being insulted?" The water spread across the metal surface, dripping onto Malik's lap. He didn't move to wipe it away. The coolness against his leg was almost calming, another sensation to focus on instead of anger. More inmates were standing now, drawn by the growing tension. The air felt electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. Officer Sandoval took another step closer, his hand resting casually near his radio. "Come on, man." Cole's voice dropped lower, meant just for Malik now. "Show us what you got. You know you want to. One swing, that's all it'll take. Show everybody you're not." "Somebody's little—" The sound of a tray clattering interrupted Cole's taunt. An older inmate, thin and unsteady, had gotten jostled by the growing crowd. His feet slipped in the spilled water, and his arms windmilled as he lost his balance. His tray went flying, sending food and plastic dishes skidding across the floor. The sudden noise sparked something in the watching crowd. Someone shoved, someone else pushed back. Within seconds, a knot of bodies formed, voices rising angry and sharp. For the first time since Cole approached, Malik looked up. His eyes went straight to the older man still trying to catch his balance on the wet floor. Without hesitation, Malik pushed his chair back and rose to his feet. The movement drew every eye in the immediate area. Cole's face lit up with cruel anticipation, thinking he'd finally provoked the reaction he wanted. Officer Sandoval's hand tightened, on his radio ready to call for backup. But Malik wasn't focused on any of them. His attention stayed fixed on the elderly inmate who needed help, his movements calm and purposeful, despite the chaos erupting around him. The chow hall seemed to slow down as Malik moved. His steps were quick but calm, like water flowing around rocks. In one smooth motion, he caught the older man's thin shoulder before it could hit the hard floor. At the same time, his other hand guided the panicked inmate's wild swing safely downward. Malik's feet shifted with the grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. His balance never wavered. The crowd went quiet, watching him control the chaos without throwing a single punch. Officer Sandoval stepped forward, voice firm. "Everyone back to your seats, now!" But something in the guard's eyes changed as he watched Malik. There was recognition there, like pieces clicking into place. The older inmate, still trembling, looked up at Malik with grateful eyes. "Thank you, son," he whispered, as Malik helped him to a nearby bench. Without a word, Malik returned to his own seat. He picked up his plastic spoon and continued eating as if nothing had happened. But the quiet didn't last long. "Wait a minute," someone whispered loud enough to carry. "That's Mac Rivers, the fighter. From TV." The words spread like fire through dry grass. "MMA guy, professional, champion." Cole's smug grin melted away as he stood there, suddenly understanding who he'd been taunting. His gang members shifted uneasily behind him. They'd watched enough fights on TV to know what Malik could have done if he'd wanted to. "Clear out," Officer Sandoval ordered. "Lunch is over." As inmates filed out, a counselor caught Malik's arm. "Rivers, got a minute?" Malik nodded, following her to a quiet corner. "We're starting a new program," she explained. "Fitness mentoring combined with Mrs. Parks's literacy circle. Chaplain Reed oversees it. Would you be interested?" Something sparked in Malik's eyes. Not hope exactly, but possibility. "Yes, ma'am. I would." "Good. Stop by tomorrow morning to fill out the paperwork." But that afternoon, the spark dimmed when Malik received another message. His parole review had been scheduled. As he read the notice, his hands tightened on the paper. Everything he'd done in the ring, all those fights, the board wouldn't see discipline, they'd see violence. Meanwhile, in a shadowy corner of the yard, Cole found himself surrounded by tattooed faces he couldn't refuse. "You made us look weak," one of them growled. "Time to prove where your loyalty lies." Cole swallowed hard. "What do you want?" "Rivers. He thinks he's better than us. Make him show his true colors, make him snap." "But," Cole started to protest. A hand gripped his shoulder, fingers digging in. "Unless you'd rather we find someone else who can follow orders." Cole knew what that meant. In here, you were either with them or against them. There was no middle ground. "No," he said quietly. "I'll do it." The hand released him, leaving invisible bruises. "Good choice. Don't disappoint us." Cole watched Malik across the yard, sitting alone with his back against the wall, eyes closed in what looked like meditation. The man he'd mocked for being weak had turned out to be the strongest person there, and now Cole had to destroy him, or lose everything. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the prison yard as inmates milled about. Some played basketball, others lifted weights, but there was new tension in the air. Everyone had seen what happened in the chow hall. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Officer Sandoval watched it all from his post, noting the whispered conversations, the meaningful glances. He'd been a guard long enough to know when trouble was brewing, but he'd also been around long enough to recognize something else. The rare sight of real strength choosing peace. Malik opened his eyes, feeling the weight of stares but choosing not to acknowledge them. He'd spent years learning to control his body, his reactions, his power. Now that control might cost him his chance at freedom. But as he watched a bird land on the prison fence, then take flight again, he knew he wouldn't change his choice. Better to be judged for peace than praised for violence. The fluorescent lights in Malik's cell hummed faintly as he sat cross-legged on his bunk, his large hands resting open on his knees. The chow hall scene kept playing in his mind, not the chaos or Cole's taunts, but the way everyone had frozen when they saw how he moved, like they were seeing a weapon instead of a man. A sharp rap on the bars made him look up. Officer Martinez held out a folded piece of paper. "From the chaplain's office," he said, then moved on with his rounds. The note was brief. "Report to Chaplain Reed tomorrow after morning count. Program intake." Malik's stomach tightened. Any attention in prison was risky attention, especially with parole coming up, but refusing wasn't smart either. The next morning, the chapel office felt smaller than Malik remembered. Sunlight filtered through the high window, catching dust motes in its beam. Chaplain Reed sat behind his metal desk, his salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, his dark eyes direct but kind. "No long speeches," Reed said, leaning forward. "Just truth. This place will use your fighting background one way or another. They'll either use it to control you, or you can use it to serve others. Your choice. Malik shifted in the hard plastic chair. Serving others could cost me parole, or it could save it. Reed pulled out a folder. We're starting something new. Basic conditioning in the gym for qualifying inmates, teaching discipline, respect, proper breathing. And there's a literacy circle run by Mrs. Evelyn Parks. A reading group? Malik frowned. Mrs. Evelyn's been volunteering here 20 years. She's a widow. Lost her veteran husband 5 years back. Sharp as they come, kind as sunrise. She sees people, not profiles. Malik stared at his hands. The same hands that had won fights, that had caused harm on his worst night. I don't know if I should be teaching anybody anything. Son. Reed's voice softened. Steady character is the best evidence there is. Show who you are day by day. That matters more than any file. After a long moment, Malik nodded. Reed handed him intake forms and a thin workbook with basic literacy skills printed on the cover. Inside was a welcome letter written in neat cursive. Dear Mr. Rivers, welcome to our circle. We're not here to judge, only to grow. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is learn something new. Remember, strength can be gentle. Warmly, Evelyn Parks back in his cell that evening. Malik sat with the workbook open to the first exercise. Write a paragraph to someone important in your life. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the pencil. He'd written his mother so many letters full of excuses, full of anger at the system. This time would be different. Dear Mama, he wrote slowly, I'm trying to change. Not just saying it this time. Really changing. I'm scared of messing up, but I'm more scared of staying the same. He folded the paper carefully, tucking it into the workbook. The words felt raw but honest. Closing his eyes, Malik whispered the same prayer his grandmother had taught him. Lord, grant me the strength for self-control. Then he reached up and clicked off his light, letting darkness fill the cell as count time approached. Tomorrow would be a new kind of test. Not of his fists, but of his heart. The morning light filtered weakly through the high windows of the cell block. Malik sat on his bunk, carefully tucking Mrs. Evelyn's letter between the worn pages of his Bible. The paper was thin, but her words felt solid, like something he could hold on to. At the guard's call for morning count, Malik stood with program pass in hand. The familiar weight of eyes followed him down the corridor toward the gym. Some curious, some hostile, all of them waiting to see what the fighter would do. The weight room echoed with his footsteps as he entered. Metal bars, rubber mats, and the sharp scent of disinfectant filled the space. Officer Sandoval stood near the entrance, arms crossed, face neutral, but alert. Let's be clear, Sandoval said, his voice firm but fair. This isn't a fight club. One wrong move, any hint of violence, and the program ends. Understood? Yes, sir. Malik nodded. That's not why I'm here. Small groups of inmates filtered in, some shuffling, others swaggering. Malik waited until they settled, then stepped forward. First rule, he said, voice steady and clear. Breathe first, think second, move last. A few snickers rippled through the group. One guy in the back called out, "What is this yoga class?" Malik didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he demonstrated a simple warm-up routine. Watch your form. Control matters more than speed. His movements were precise, measured. Some inmates followed along awkwardly, but Malik offered quiet corrections without shame or mockery. Good, he'd say. Now slower. Feel the muscle working. A shadow crossed the doorway. Cole stood there, tattooed arms crossed, a smirk playing on his face. His eyes said everything his mouth didn't. This gentle approach was weakness. Malik met his gaze once, calm and direct, then turned back to his students. Remember to breathe, he told them. Your body knows what to do if you give it time to think. The morning passed in a rhythm of instruction and practice. Some men struggled with the patience required, but Malik's steady presence kept them focused. He showed them how strength could be controlled, measured, useful beyond threats. By the time the session ended, sweat darkened their shirts, but something else had changed too. There was less posturing, more actual work. A few even nodded respectfully as they filed out. Malik felt it, a small spark warming his chest. Purpose felt different than pride, better. The afternoon yard time brought harsh sun and the usual tension. Malik had just finished his walking lap when Cole appeared at his shoulder. The loud mockery was gone, replaced by something colder. Playing teacher now. Cole's whisper carried venom. Think that'll help your parole? One incident is all it takes, one report of aggressive behavior. Behind Cole, his crew spread out casually, but Malik recognized the pattern. A net closing slowly. Malik kept his hands loose at his sides, his breathing steady. Without a word he turned and walked away. But he felt them watching, felt the pressure building like storm clouds gathering. Their silence spoke louder than threats. He'd taught the men that morning. Breathe first. Think second. Move last. Now he had to live it. The storm was coming. But Malik had learned long ago. Sometimes the strongest move was walking away. The evening sun slanted through barred windows, casting long shadows across the institutional classroom. Mrs. Evelyn Parks hummed softly as she arranged dog-eared paperbacks on the scratched tables. Her grey hair caught the light, creating a gentle halo effect that matched her warm presence. A small tin of peppermint candies clicked as she set it down, a touch of home in a place that desperately needed it. Malik entered with 3 other inmates, nodding to the guard at the door. The familiar antiseptic smell of prison mingled with the sweet peppermint scent. As Mrs. Evelyn looked up, her face brightening. "Welcome, gentlemen. I'm Mrs. Evelyn, and I'm so glad you're here." Her voice carried the soft lilt of someone used to putting others at ease. "Help yourself to a candy. My grandmother always said peppermint helps the mind stay sharp." She made eye contact with each man, using their names like gifts. "Marcus, how's that shoulder healing?" "James, did your sister have her baby yet?" "Malik, I heard wonderful things about your work in the gym today." A few more inmates filtered in, including a rail-thin young man who slipped into a back corner seat. Mrs. Evelyn's eyes tracked him with gentle concern. "That's Troy," Marcus whispered to Malik. "Been here 3 months. Barely talks." Mrs. Evelyn settled into her chair, smoothing her sensible skirt. "Now, we'll start simple today. I'd like each person to read just 1 sentence from these cards." She held up index cards with large, clear print. No rush, no pressure. Marcus went first, his deep voice stumbling slightly over appreciation, but finishing strong. James read his sentence cleanly, though his hands shook a little. When Troy's turn came, his face flushed dark red, his fingers twisted in his shirt hem. I can't," he mumbled, shrinking lower in his seat. Instead of pushing, Mrs. Evelyn just nodded. "That's all right, dear. Sometimes the bravest thing is just showing up." Malik studied Troy's hunched shoulders, remembering his own struggles with shame. Without drawing attention, he shifted his chair closer. "Hey," he said softly, angling the card so only Troy could see. "Let's take it slow. Just between us." Troy glanced up, surprise flickering across his face. Here was Malik Rivers, the fighter everyone whispered about, speaking as gently as a big brother. The, Troy whispered. "That's it," Malik encouraged. "1 word at a time. The dog ran. Perfect. Keep going. In the park." "Man, you got it," Malik said, his smile genuine. "That's the whole sentence right there." A tiny answering smile tugged at Troy's lips. Mrs. Evelyn watched the interaction, her eyes bright with understanding. When the group took a short break, she approached Malik. "You remind me of my Robert," she said softly, touching the wedding ring she still wore. "He was Army, 30 years, taught hand-to-hand combat." She smiled at Malik's surprised look. But what made him special was how he used that strength. He always said real courage isn't about who claps, it's about doing right when nobody's watching at all. The session wrapped up too quickly. As they filed out, Troy clutched his borrowed paperback like it might disappear. Malik noticed how carefully the young man tucked it against his chest, protecting it. Back in the unit, the familiar sounds of prison nights settled in. Distant doors, murmured conversations, the hum of fluorescent lights. Just before lights out, Malik heard a whisper from Troy's cell. "The dog ran in the park." Over and over, Troy practiced in the darkness, each repetition stronger than the last. Malik lay on his thin mattress, a smile spreading across his face. For the first time since entering these walls, hope felt real. Not like a dream, but like something he could actually touch. In the quiet, Troy's voice grew more confident with each try. Malik closed his eyes, letting that simple victory wash over him. Maybe strength wasn't just about what his hands could do in a fight. Maybe it was about helping someone else find their own kind of courage, one small sentence at a time. The morning light hadn't yet touched the prison windows when Malik opened his eyes. He sat up slowly on his thin mattress, careful not to wake his cellmate. The concrete floor felt cold under his feet as he began his morning stretches, movements gentle and precise. "Strength can be gentle," he whispered, Mrs. Evelyn's words becoming a quiet mantra with each controlled breath. The phrase felt different now, less like advice and more like a lifeline. In the gym later that morning, a dozen men gathered around him on worn exercise mats. Malik demonstrated a simple balance exercise, his voice steady and clear. "Plant your feet shoulder-width apart," he instructed. "Think about roots growing down through your feet into the ground. Now breathe, deep and slow." A younger inmate wobbled, drawing snickers from others. Malik stepped closer, adjusting the man's stance with careful hands. "That's it. Nobody's born knowing this stuff. We all start somewhere." The session continued, focusing on control rather than power. Malik watched. Pride replaced frustration on their faces as they mastered each small movement. Near the water fountain afterward, shadows fell across Malik's path. Cole's crew, 4 men with hard eyes and harder smiles, formed a loose circle around him. "Hey, champ," one of them said, voice dripping with fake friendliness. "Been watching your little yoga class. Pretty impressive setup you got going." Malik kept his hands visible, his breathing even. "Just trying to help guys stay healthy." "That's exactly what we're thinking about, health." Cole's second-in-command leaned closer. "Lots of accidents happen in prison. But protected people, they stay real healthy. We're offering you a spot," another added. "Your skills, our loyalty. Smart move all around." Malik looked each man in the eye, his voice quiet but firm. "I appreciate the offer, but I won't join any group that runs on hate or fear. That's not strength, that's poison." The fake smiles vanished. "Wrong answer, brother," Cole's man said, ice replacing the warmth in his tone. "Real wrong answer." They melted away as a guard approached, but their cold stares lingered like frost. Later, seated in Chaplain Reed's office, Malik noticed how the sunlight through the barred window made cross-shaped shadows on the desk. "You're carrying something heavy," Reed said simply. "Want to set it down for a minute?" Malik's hands tightened on his knees. The truth he'd been holding back rose like floodwater against a cracking dam. 5 years ago," he started, his voice rough. "Outside Murphy's bar in Cincinnati. 2 guys were fighting over a girl, I think, or a parking spot, maybe both." He swallowed hard. "I was leaving after watching a fight on TV with friends. Saw these guys squaring up. One had a bottle." Reed listened without interrupting as Malik continued. I just wanted to stop it. Break it up before somebody got hurt. Use the same moves I'd used to separate guys in the gym. But the pavement was wet. When I pushed them apart, one guy, Mike Stevens was his name, he slipped, hit his head wrong on the curb." Malik's eyes filled but didn't spill. "He had 2 kids, a wife. They offered me a plea deal, manslaughter instead of second-degree murder. I took it, retired from fighting that same day. These hands," he looked down at them like they belonged to someone else. "They only know how to break things." Reed let the silence settle before speaking. "You're carrying guilt. That's appropriate. A man died. But guilt can either bury you or build you. The choice is yours. How do I build anything good with these?" Malik held up his hands. "The same way a surgeon holds a scalpel," Reed answered, "with respect for its power and dedication to healing instead of harm. Accountability isn't just about paying a price, it's about transforming the weapon into a tool." Later, alone in the chapel's front pew, Malik pulled out paper and a stubby pencil. His hand shook as he wrote 2 words at the top. "I'm sorry." The pencil moved faster after that, pouring out truth without excuses. He wrote to Mike Stevens' family, to his own mother, to himself. The words blurred as his eyes filled again, but he kept writing, choosing naked honesty over the armor of self-pity. With each sentence, the weight didn't exactly lift, but it shifted, like learning a new stance, finding balance, even while carrying something heavy. The chapel remained quiet except for the scratch of his pencil and the sound of steady breathing as Malik filled page after page, transforming regret into responsibility, one painful word at a time. The classroom felt different in the late afternoon light. Shadows stretched across the worn desks, while Mrs. Evelyn passed out dog-eared paperbacks, her silver hair catching the sun from the barred window. The small group of inmates settled into their chairs, including Troy, who sat a little straighter today. "We're reading about new beginnings," Evelyn announced, her voice warm like honey tea. "Just one paragraph each." Malik listened, as each man took his turn. Some stumbled over longer words. Others rushed through like they were ripping off a bandage. Troy managed 3 sentences without stopping, and Malik noticed the quiet pride in the younger man's half-smile. When the last book closed, Evelyn dismissed the group but touched Malik's arm. "Could you stay for just 2 minutes, dear?" He nodded, hanging back as chairs scraped and boots shuffled out. The guard at the door stepped into the hallway, giving them space, but staying close enough to see through the window. Evelyn's face grew serious, though her eyes remained kind. "I heard from the staff about your parole review coming up." She folded her hands on the desk. "And I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear." Malik's chest tightened. He'd been doing everything right, staying quiet, helping others, following every rule. "The parole board," she continued softly but firmly, "they might look at your fighting background and see it differently than we do. They might see risk instead of discipline." The truth of it hit him like a gut punch. Everything he'd trained for, all those years of control and focus, they could twist it into proof he didn't belong outside. His stomach dropped as if the floor had vanished. "But," Evelyn reached for her bag, "we're going to give them something else to see." She pulled out a slim notebook with a blue cover. "Every night I want you to write 1 page, what you did that day, what you learned. Most importantly, exactly how you plan to live differently when you're released." Malik took the notebook, running his thumb along its clean edge. "You think it'll help? Actions tell the truth, Malik. But sometimes people need help seeing it clearly." She patted his hand. "Write it down, every night. No excuses." Walking back to the unit, Officer Sandoval fell into step beside him. The guard's voice was low, meant just for Malik's ears. "She's right, you know. One incident, even just a rumor of trouble, could sink your chances." Malik nodded, gripping the notebook tighter. "I understand. The board looks for patterns," Sandoval continued. "Show them boring is beautiful. No arguments, no ego games. Just steady choices, day after day." Back, in his cell, Malik sat on his bunk, the notebook open on his lap. Under the dim light, he practiced the words he'd say to the parole board, whispering them like a prayer. "I can't change the past, but I can choose who my strength protects." He wrote it down, then slipped the paper under his pillow. The mattress crinkled as he lay back, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be another day of careful steps, of watching his words, of proving his hands could build instead of break. He closed his eyes, letting his breath even out, knowing each quiet day brought him closer to freedom, if he could just stay steady enough to reach it. The noise of the unit faded around him, metal doors clanking, distant voices arguing over nothing, someone's radio playing too loud. But Malik held onto his center, the way he used to before matches. Only now winning meant something different. It meant becoming so consistent that even the doubtful would have to see the truth. He wasn't just controlling his strength, he was transforming it. The morning sun cast long shadows across the prison yard as inmates filtered out for recreation time. Malik stood near the fence, watching a new inmate, barely 20 by the look of him, struggling through push-ups on the cracked concrete. The young man's arms trembled with each attempt, his form all wrong. Other inmates snickered, but Malik remembered his first days in the gym before he'd learned proper technique. He walked over slowly, careful to telegraph his movements. "Mind if I give you a tip?" The young inmate startled, then nodded warily. "Move your hands about shoulder-width apart," Malik demonstrated without getting down himself, "and keep your back straight, like a plank." From the pull-up bar 20 feet away, Cole's tattooed knuckles tightened. He watched Malik guide the newcomer through proper form, his jaw clenching as other inmates gathered to listen. "Breathe steady," Malik was saying. "It's not about speed. It's about control." The young inmate's form improved immediately. A small smile crossed his face as he completed 5 clean push-ups. "There you go," Malik said quietly. "Same time tomorrow if you want." In the dining hall later, Cole sat with his crew but seemed distracted. When Malik passed their table, Cole muttered, teacher's pet under his breath, but his usual venom was missing. His eyes darted between the observant guards and Malik's steady hands, as if calculating risks. The evening brought another literacy circle. Mrs. Evelyn had just settled into her chair when heavy footsteps made everyone turn. Cole stood in the doorway, trying to look tough, despite his obvious discomfort. The room tensed, but Mrs. Evelyn simply smiled and held out her tin of peppermints. "Welcome. Take any seat you'd like." Cole slouched into a chair in the back corner, arms crossed. When Mrs. Evelyn offered him a worn paperback, he accepted it with exaggerated reluctance. "Today we're reading about family connections," she announced. "Who'd like to start?" They went around the circle, each man reading a paragraph. When it was Cole's turn, he cleared his throat roughly. "My sister was always—" His voice caught unexpectedly. He swallowed hard and tried again. "My sister was always the smart one." The words seemed to hit him somewhere tender. His fingers tightened on the book's edges. After the session, other inmates filtered out, but Cole remained frozen in his chair. Mrs. Evelyn busied herself straightening papers, giving him space. "I haven't talked to her in 3 years, Cole finally said, staring at the floor. "My sister." His voice was barely a whisper now. She married a black man." Mrs. Evelyn set down her papers but didn't speak. "They had a baby last year. A little girl." Cole's shoulders hunched. "I've never even seen a picture. My own niece. That must be very painful," Mrs. Evelyn said softly. "The guys, my crew, they can't know I'm even thinking about them." Cole scrubbed roughly at his eyes. "But sometimes I wonder what she looks like, if she's got Sarah's smile." Mrs. Evelyn moved closer, her sensible shoes quiet on the linoleum. "You know, Cole, I've noticed something in my years volunteering here. Hate is loud. It has to be, to drown out the heart. But loneliness—" She shook her head gently. "Loneliness is louder still." Cole's breath hitched. Without another word, he grabbed the book and hurried out. That night, in the darkness of his cell, Cole pulled out the paperback again and again. His calloused fingers traced the words as if searching for a hidden map, a way back to the family he'd lost. The book fell open to the chapter about forgiveness, pages already creased from repeated reading. The pre-dawn darkness pressed heavy against the prison walls. Cole's eyes snapped open as rough hands yanked him from his bunk. 2 shadows dragged him to the unit's far corner, where the cameras couldn't quite reach. His gang leader, Marcus, stood waiting with arms crossed over his tattooed chest. "Time's up, brother." Marcus's whisper carried steel. "Rivers needs to show his true colors before that parole hearing, and you're gonna help make it happen." Cole's stomach knotted. Just yesterday he'd sat in Mrs. Evelyn's circle, thinking about his sister, about choices and changes. Now the familiar taste of fear filled his mouth. "What exactly are you planning?" His voice cracked. "Simple." Marcus leaned closer. "We create a situation. He loses control. Guards see it. No parole for the peaceful warrior." A cold smile. "And you'll be right in the middle, proving where your loyalty lies." Cole felt the walls closing in. The gang was his shield, his family inside these walls. Quitting meant becoming prey. But Malik's quiet strength, the way he helped that young kid with push-ups, Mrs. Evelyn's words about loneliness being louder than hate, it all churned in his gut. "I don't—" Cole started. Marcus's hand clamped on his shoulder. "This isn't a debate, brother. You're in or you're out, and out means—" He let the threat hang. The morning count bell saved Cole from answering. As inmates lined up for inspection, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. After count, Malik headed to the gym with his usual calm purpose. Cole lingered by the doorway, watching him approach. The words bubbled up, a warning, an apology, something to stop what was coming. As Malik passed, Cole managed to murmur, "Watch yourself." But Marcus materialized behind him like a shadow, and Cole's throat closed around the rest of the warning. Malik's steps didn't falter, but a slight tension in his shoulders showed he'd heard. The weight room felt wrong today. Too many spectators lounged against the walls. Too many knowing smirks waited for chaos. Even the air felt thick with anticipation. Malik surveyed the room with careful eyes as he led the group through warm-ups. He kept everything basic, no partner work, no complicated moves that could turn dangerous. His voice remained steady, repeating the familiar mantra, "Breathe first, think second, move last." Cole stood in the back, heart hammering. He saw the subtle positioning of Marcus's crew, the way they'd spread out to control the space. One wrong move, one pushed button, and Malik's chance at freedom would vanish. Halfway through the session, Malik called it, "That's enough for today. Remember what we learned about breathing. Use it outside these walls." He dismissed the group early, standing near Officer Sandoval as everyone filed out. In the dining hall, Sandoval made his way to Malik's table. The guard spoke quietly while pretending to check the nearby trash can. "Stay where cameras can see you. No blind spots, no isolated corridors. Not until after that hearing." Malik gave a slight nod, understanding the warning. That night, Cole lay on his bunk, Mrs. Evelyn's book pressed against his chest. Across the dim unit, he could see Malik writing at his desk, probably working on his parole statement. The sight made Cole's chest ache. He thought about his sister Sarah, how she'd tried to talk to him about love and prejudice before he cut her off. He thought about his niece, growing up never knowing her uncle because he'd chosen hate over family. He thought about Malik, using his strength to lift others up instead of tear them down. The book's pages crinkled under Cole's tightening grip. His next choice would either save a man's chance at redemption or destroy it. The weight of that truth pressed down like steel bars. Looking at his gang tattoos, Cole realized he'd spent years letting marks on his skin define his soul. But watching Malik these past weeks had shown him a different kind of strength. The question was, did Cole have enough of that strength to finally choose right over easy? Marcus's threat echoed in his mind. "You're in or you're out." Cole stared at the ceiling, his conscience waging war with his fear as the night crept forward. The counseling office felt smaller than usual as Malik sat in the hard plastic chair, his hands folded in his lap. The afternoon sun slanted through barred windows, casting shadows that made everything feel more serious. "The meeting is approved for tomorrow at 10, the counselor said, sliding a form across the desk. "One family member will attend. Are you still willing to participate?" Malik's throat went tight. The weight of what he'd done, the life he'd taken with one wrong move, pressed down on his chest. Part of him wanted to run, to make excuses, to hide in his cell, but he forced himself to nod. "Yes, ma'am," he managed. His voice came out rough. "I need to do this." She studied him carefully. "This isn't required for your parole, you understand that?" "I understand." Malik took a deep breath. "But I can't move forward without facing what I did. Real change means looking at the hard things." After signing the forms, Malik walked to the chapel where Chaplain Reed was waiting. The small office smelled like coffee and old books. Reed didn't waste time on small talk. "No speeches tomorrow," Reed said firmly. "No long explanations, just truth and responsibility. Can you handle that?" "I think so." Malik's fingers twisted together. "What if they hate me?" "They might," Reed answered honestly. "Your job isn't to make them forgive you. Your job is to own what happened and show them who you're choosing to become." They spent an hour going over what to say and what not to say. No excuses about the chaos that night. No mentions of good intentions. Just the simple, awful truth. His actions ended someone's life. At dinner, Malik barely touched his food. His mind kept circling back to tomorrow. What would he see in their eyes? How do you face a family you've broken? After the meal, Mrs. Evelyn was waiting in her usual classroom. She had a notepad ready, and that steady grandmotherly presence that made even the hardest truths feel manageable. "Simple words," she advised, passing him a pencil. "Human words, not prison words or lawyer words, just speak from here." She touched her heart. They practiced. Evelyn would ask the hard questions. "Why did you do it? How do you sleep at night? What makes you think you deserve freedom?" Each time she pushed Malik to strip away defenses and speak raw truth. "I was wrong," he practiced saying. "I acted without thinking. I took something precious that I can never give back." Through the classroom window, Malik saw Cole being cornered by his crew near the basketball court. Their faces were hard, demanding. Cole nodded at whatever they were saying, but his eyes looked haunted. Malik recognized that look. A man trapped by his own choices. Back in his cell, Malik carefully folded his notes and tucked them into his Bible. His hands were steady, but his heart raced. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. He repeated his prepared words until they felt real in his mouth. "I can't undo what happened, but I can live differently from now on." When lights out came, Malik knelt beside his bunk. His prayer was simple. God, give me courage to face them. Tomorrow. And if trouble comes before then, he paused, thinking of Cole's sick expression. Help me stay calm. Help me choose right. The darkness pressed close as Malik lay down, his Bible near his pillow. Tomorrow he would face the deepest consequence of his actions. Tonight all he could do was breathe and remember what Mrs. Evelyn always said: strength can be gentle. His last thought before sleep was a quiet hope that somehow, facing this truth might help heal more than just his own soul. The morning sun filtered through the reinforced windows of the visitation room, casting long rectangles of light across the institutional carpet. Malik Rivers sat with his hands folded on the metal table, his orange jumpsuit crisp and neat, waiting. His heart thumped against his ribs like a boxer working the heavy bag. The door opened. A middle-aged woman in a navy blazer entered, the facilitator, followed by someone who made Malik's breath catch. She was maybe 50, with silver threading through her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much sorrow. The victim's sister. Mr. Rivers, this is Margaret Chen, the facilitator said quietly. Malik nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He'd practiced words for days, but now they felt small, inadequate against the weight of what he'd done. Mrs. Chen, thank you for coming, he finally managed. His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. She sat across from him, straight-backed but tired. Lines around her mouth spoke of years spent carrying grief like a heavy stone. Malik started, then had to pause to steady himself. I need to tell you about that night. All of it, no excuses. The story came out slowly. The parking lot, the shoving match he tried to break up. One push that went wrong. One fall that changed everything. His voice shook when he described hearing the sound, that terrible sound, of a head hitting concrete. I took the plea deal because I was guilty, Malik said. Not of meaning to hurt anyone, but of thinking I could control a situation with force. Of believing my strength made me responsible to jump in. I was wrong, and your brother paid the price. Margaret Chen's hands were clasped tight in her lap, but her gaze never wavered. I'm sorry, Malik continued, the words he'd practiced flowing now from a deeper place. And I will spend my life doing better, being better. Silence filled the room. The facilitator stayed quiet, letting the moment breathe. Finally, Margaret spoke. Her voice was soft but clear as a bell. What will you do with your strength now? The question hit Malik like a clean punch to the solar plexus, but somehow he knew the answer. I want to protect people who need it, he said. Mentor kids who think violence makes them strong. Show them there's another way. He met her eyes directly. And I'll never pretend the past didn't happen. Your brother's death will be part of every choice I make. She nodded once, a small gesture that carried the weight of mountains. They talked for another 30 minutes, about her brother's life, not just his death, about the years she'd spent trying to understand. She didn't offer Hollywood forgiveness or dramatic absolution, but by the end something had shifted in the air between them. Walking back to his unit, Malik felt lighter, not happy. He had no right to happiness today, but clean, like a deep wound finally washed clear of infection. The truth had hurt, but it had also freed something inside him. That evening, the literacy circle gathered as usual. Mrs. Evelyn handed out dog-eared paperbacks and her ever-present peppermint candies. Cole slipped in late, taking his spot in the back corner. But tonight was different. During a discussion about second chances, Cole suddenly spoke up. His voice was rough, uncertain. I don't know how to be different. The room went still. Even the constant prison noise seemed to fade. Malik looked at Cole, really looked at him. Past the tattoos and the practiced sneer, he saw what he'd missed before fear. The desperate need to belong somewhere, even if that somewhere was ugly. It starts with one true thing, Malik said quietly. Not a big speech, not trying to fix everything at once, just one choice that's really yours. From her seat by the whiteboard, Mrs. Evelyn nodded. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears and something that looked like pride. Later, lying on his narrow bunk, Malik stared up at the ceiling. The concrete was cracked in a pattern he'd memorized months ago. For the first time, he allowed himself a fragile hope that maybe the parole board would see past his fighter's history, see a man rebuilding himself, not a weapon waiting to explode. He touched the Bible where it lay on his chest, feeling the folded edge of Margaret Chen's last words to him. Choose well. Two simple words that felt like both a blessing and a challenge. Through the unit's evening, quiet, he heard Cole's bunk creak above him. Both men lay awake, each holding their own hard truths, each facing the next small choice that might lead them home. The prison hallways had gone quiet. Most inmates settled into their bunks for the night. But Troy couldn't sleep. He paced 3 steps, turned, paced back, his thin frame casting nervous shadows on the wall. When he finally spotted Malik returning from literacy circle, he rushed over, voice barely above a whisper. "They're planning something," Troy said, eyes darting. "The gang. I heard them talking when they thought nobody was listening." Malik placed a steady hand on Troy's shoulder, feeling the young man trembling. "Thank you for telling me, but now I need you to do something important." "What?" "Stay in public areas. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, find Officer Sandoval. He's fair. He'll listen." Troy nodded, quickly, relief flooding his face at having clear instructions to follow. Morning arrived with harsh fluorescent lights and the clatter of breakfast trays. Malik sat with his back to the wall, eyes scanning the room between bites of lukewarm oatmeal. The tension felt different today, thicker like the air before a storm. It happened fast. A shout from the serving line, bodies colliding. Someone stumbled backward, arms windmilling. Another inmate lurched forward, fist raised. The carefully orchestrated chaos pulled toward Malik like a tide. He moved on instinct and training, the same calm precision he'd shown in the ring. No strikes, no aggression, just controlled movements to guide flailing limbs away from faces, to step between anger and its target. His breathing stayed steady, his mind clear. But voices rose over the commotion, all saying the same thing. "He started it. The fighter's losing it. Watch out, he's dangerous." A young guard Malik didn't recognize reached for his radio, face tight with alarm. The man knew only one thing about Malik Rivers, that he was an MMA fighter with a death on his record. Through that lens, every protective move looked like violence waiting to explode. "On the ground! Now!" The guard's voice cracked with nervous authority. Malik complied immediately, hands open, movements slow and clear. He could feel the cold floor through his thin prison uniform, could hear the jingling of handcuffs being unclipped from a belt. Officer Sandoval pushed through the crowd, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "Wait," he started to say. "Let me." But policy was policy. The cuffs clicked shut around Malik's wrists. 2 guards gripped his arms, walking him out of the dining hall past faces filled with satisfaction or sorrow or shame. Through the office window, he glimpsed Mrs. Evelyn being escorted toward the exit, her volunteer badge already collected. Her eyes found his for just a moment, fierce with concern and determination. Then she was gone, banned from returning until the safety issue was resolved. From the breakfast line, Cole watched it all unfold. The color had drained from his face as the lies he'd helped create spiraled beyond his control. His hand clenched around his empty tray until his knuckles went white. The segregation unit was underground, all concrete and steel and echoes. The door slammed with a hollow boom that seemed to seal away hope itself. Malik sat alone on the hard bench, staring at his hands. Hands that had tried to protect, not harm. That had guided instead of struck. That still couldn't escape their past. "Please, God," he whispered into the cold silence. "Don't let this be who they think I am." Pale morning light sliced through the narrow window of the segregation cell, painting a thin rectangle on the concrete floor. Malik Rivers opened his eyes, his body stiff from the hard mattress. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the distant clang of metal doors and the steady rhythm of his own breathing. He sat up slowly, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension. The events from yesterday played through his mind like a bad movie. The shouts, the staged chaos, the feeling of hands grabbing at him. His fists clenched involuntarily as anger bubbled up inside him. Then Mrs. Evelyn's voice floated through his memory, gentle but firm. Strength can be gentle. He forced his fingers to uncurl, laying his palms flat against his thighs. The anger was still there, but he wouldn't let it control him. Around mid-morning, footsteps echoed down the hall. Keys jingled, and the door opened to reveal Chaplain Reed's serious face. 10 minutes, the guard announced. Reed settled onto the metal stool bolted to the floor. He didn't waste time with empty comfort. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "I didn't fight back," Malik said. His voice came out hoarse. "I did everything right, and they still—" "I know." Reed nodded. "And right now you're facing the biggest temptation of all, to prove your strength there." "Wrong way." Malik stood up and paced the small cell. "Part of me wants to. Just once I want to show them what I could do if I—" He stopped, pressing his forehead against the cool wall. "That's exactly what they're counting on," Reed said. "They want you to prove their story true." Malik turned back around. "I'm tired," he admitted. "So tired of letting other people's hate control my life. Of being seen as nothing but these hands that can hurt." Reed pulled out a small notepad and pen. "Then choose one courageous act right now. Write down exactly what happened. Every detail, every witness. Tell the truth calmly, even if it feels like no one's listening at first." Malik took the pad and sat cross-legged on his bunk. His handwriting was careful, deliberate as he described the setup, how he'd used his training to prevent violence rather than cause it. He listed the names of inmates who saw the truth, including Troy. When he finished, he handed the statement back to Reed. "Truth is stronger than any punch I could throw," Malik said softly. Across the prison in the main unit, Cole Harkness sat at a metal table, his breakfast tray untouched in front of him. His stomach churned with guilt as he watched other inmates move through their morning routines. The weight of what he'd allowed to happen pressed down on his shoulders. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Malik's face. Not angry, not threatening, just steady. In all these months of baiting and mocking, Malik had never once struck back. Never tried to humiliate Cole the way Cole had humiliated him. That restraint, that mercy, had cracked something open inside Cole's chest that wouldn't heal until he did right. The afternoon sun slanted through the unit windows when Cole finally pushed himself up from his bunk. His hands trembled as he pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote everything down. The gang's plan, his own part in it, how Malik had been framed. When he finished, he folded the paper carefully and walked to where Officer Sandoval stood monitoring the unit. Cole's voice shook. "I need to tell you the truth." Sandoval's expression remained neutral as Cole handed him the confession. The officer read it slowly, then met Cole's eyes. "You understand what this means?" Sandoval asked quietly. "For you?" Cole nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, sir. But somebody has to say what really happened." The evening light faded through barred windows as Officer Sandoval sat in the security office, his eyes fixed on multiple screens. He rewound the footage again, studying every angle of the incident. On one screen, he could see Malik's measured movements, hands open, stepping between bodies without throwing a single punch. On another, the orchestrated chaos unfolded exactly as Cole had described in his confession. Sandoval made detailed notes, matching timestamps to statements. The truth emerged in stark black and white. Malik had shown restraint, while others created violence around him. The officer's pen moved steadily across his notepad, building a case that could no longer be ignored. When morning came, Sandoval walked with purpose to the lieutenant's office, a thick folder under his arm containing camera stills, statements, and Cole's handwritten confession. The lieutenant reviewed everything twice, his expression growing more serious with each page. "Get Rivers up here for a hearing," he said finally, "this afternoon." In segregation, Malik sat cross-legged on his bunk, eyes closed, practicing the steady breathing that had carried him through countless fights in the ring. The cell door clanked open. "Rivers, on your feet." Two officers escorted him to administration, where Chaplain Reed waited outside the hearing room. "Stick to the facts," Reed advised quietly. "Nothing else matters now." Inside, Malik faced a panel of 3 staff members, but it was Cole's entrance that made the room go still. Cole looked smaller somehow, without his usual swagger. His hands trembled as he gripped the back of a metal chair. "Tell us what happened," the lieutenant said. Cole swallowed hard, then spoke. His voice cracked at first, but grew stronger. "We set it up," he admitted. "The whole thing. We wanted to make Rivers look violent before his parole hearing." He described the staged fight, the false accusations, the planned chaos. But Rivers never threw a punch, not once. He just stopped people from getting hurt. Malik sat quietly, watching Cole choose truth over tribe. It cost him everything. His protection, his status, his only twisted sense of belonging. But Cole kept talking, kept naming names, kept admitting his own part in it all. Through the window, Malik spotted Chaplain Reed receiving an envelope. Minutes later, the chaplain slipped him a folded note in Mrs. Evelyn's familiar handwriting. "Your restraint, is your testimony." Malik tucked it carefully into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. The hearing concluded, and Malik was escorted back to the unit. In a narrow corridor, he and Troy walked together under supervision. Suddenly, heavy footsteps approached from behind, several of Cole's former gang members, faces tight with fury at being exposed. Troy tensed, but Malik moved smoothly, positioning himself between the younger man and the approaching threat. His hands stayed open at his sides, peaceful but present. Someone shoved him hard against the wall. "Still won't fight back?" one of them sneered. "Don't need to," Malik answered quietly, shielding Troy with his body until guards rushed in to separate everyone. Later that night, in his regular cell for the first time in days, Malik received the official notice. Disciplinary report dismissed. Parole review reinstated. Through the unit window, he watched Cole being escorted to transfer, headed for a rehabilitation program where he could safely continue choosing a different path. Malik sat on his bunk, Mrs. Evelyn's note still in his pocket. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer that felt like his first real breath in years. "Thank you," he said softly to the quiet cell. "Thank you for helping me stay who I want to become." The morning sun cast long shadows across the prison parking lot as Malik Rivers stood at the gate, a small cardboard box tucked under his arm containing everything he owned, a Bible, some letters, and a few worn books from Mrs. Evelyn's literacy circle. The guard finished the paperwork, and the heavy metal door buzzed one final time. Malik stepped through, his heart pounding against his ribs. The morning air felt different on this side of the fence, cleaner somehow, full of possibility. He breathed it in slowly, the way he'd taught others to do when emotions ran high. Chaplain. Reed waited by his car, hands in the pockets of his worn jacket. Next to him stood Mrs. Evelyn, her silver hair catching the early light. Her eyes were wet, but her smile could have lit up the whole parking lot. "Well now," she said, her voice warm and steady. "Look who's ready to change some lives." Malik set his box down carefully and shook Chaplain Reed's extended hand. The chaplain's grip was firm, grounding. "Remember what we talked about," Reed said quietly. "One day at a time. Let your actions speak." "Yes, sir," Malik nodded. "I won't waste this chance." Mrs. Evelyn stepped forward and wrapped him in a hug that felt like coming home. "I'm as proud as if you were my own," she whispered, patting his back. "You show them what real strength looks like." "Thank you," Malik's voice caught, "for seeing me as more than my mistakes." "Just keep breathing first," she reminded him, with a gentle smile. "And thinking second, and moving last," he finished, managing a small laugh. "I won't forget." That same evening, in the rehabilitation unit's small study room, Cole Harkness sat alone at a metal desk. His hands trembled as he smoothed out a piece of lined paper. The overhead lights hummed, and somewhere down the hall a door clanged shut, but Cole barely heard it. He was focused on finding the right words. Words without hate, without excuses. "Dear Sarah," he wrote, then stopped. "How do you apologize for years of chosen darkness? For missing a niece's entire life? Because pride meant more than love?" He took a deep breath, remembering what he'd learned in literacy circle. "Just tell the truth. I'm sorry," he continued. "I was wrong. About everything. I let hate eat up all the good parts of me until I couldn't even see my own family anymore. I missed watching your daughter grow up because I was too scared to admit I was the one who needed to change." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. The words blurred on the page, but he kept writing. "I understand if you never want to hear from me again, but if there's ever a chance, even years from now, I'd like to meet my niece just once, just to tell her that her uncle finally learned how to be human again." Cole folded the letter carefully, his hands steadier now. At the mail drop, he hesitated for just a moment before letting it go. 3 months passed in a blur of parole check-ins and honest work. Malik took every job he could find, stocking shelves, cleaning offices, helping at a moving company. He lived simply, saving every extra dollar. In the evenings, he studied business permits and grant applications, building his dream piece by piece. And now, here he stood, in a freshly painted community center gym. The mats were used but clean, the equipment basic but solid. On the wall hung a simple banner, "Strength Through Peace, Youth Mentoring Program." The room was packed. Parents sat in folding chairs while teenagers clustered near the front, trying to look tough, but failing to hide their curiosity. Mrs. Evelyn beamed from her seat in the first row, that same proud light in her eyes that had guided him through darker days. The back, half hidden in the shadows, stood Cole. He was thinner, cleaner cut, his old tattoos fading under long sleeves. His re-entry officer had approved this visit, seeing the value in witnessing what change really looked like. In Cole's hand was a creased photograph, a little girl with her mother's smile and skin the color of coffee with cream. His niece, Sarah, had finally written back. Malik caught Cole's eye across the room and gave a single understanding nod. Then he turned to face his first class of students, seeing in their faces all the fear and anger he once carried. "First rule," he said clearly, his voice steady with purpose. "Before anything else, we breathe." The room fell silent, waiting. These kids had expected a fight gym, a place to learn how to hurt better. Instead, they were about to learn how to heal. "Breathe first," Malik repeated, and 20 young chests rose and fell together, taking their first step toward a different kind of strength.